Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. It's the big verdict day for the Indian elections, the Lok Sabha polls, and by all accounts, the NDA suffering a reversal but in a position to form the next government. And what does this mandate mean, and what is the likely impact as far as the investment outlook for India is concerned? Joining me now on that subject, Jim Rogers, founder of Rogers International Commodity Index, one of the most well-known faces in the markets globally, an author and someone who's always been very positive in India over the last few months, especially. Jim, welcome to Business Today Television. A weaker mandate for Prime Minister Modi, what does it mean in terms of the investment outlook for India?
If Mr. Modi does what he says, it's going to make India an extremely exciting country, even more exciting than it has been in the past, and it's going to put India even more on the international investment scene, if he does what he says.
Jim, the Indian voter has sprung a surprise. All exit polls were suggesting a very significant mandate in terms of the numbers. That hasn't happened. Do you think international investors will also review the way they look at India as an investment opportunity? Will they be afraid of or worried about political instability and that impacting the government and its functioning?
Well, if Mr. Modi has said some very, very good things in the last 2 terms, he has done some good things. India needs to open, if you want to have international investors more, you need to open up more. You need to make your currency convertible. You need to make it easy for investors to invest in India. I mean, if I want to invest in Australia, it's very easy. If I want to invest in India, it is not easy yet. Mr. Modi says he will make it easy.
Jim, the Indian markets and the benchmark indices have had a very, very bad day. Billions and billions of dollars of investor wealth wiped out today. The benchmark Nifty down well over 5.5%. The Sensex down, and all sectors were in a deep sea of red when markets were open today. There were just a handful of companies that were in the green, and these were consumption stocks. Do you see this event as an event that is likely to derate the Indian stock market from an international investor perspective?
Well, it's very common in the investment world when something is good news is coming. The expression is buy on the rumor, sell on the news. Now the news, we thought this was coming, so many people bought in advance. Now it is here, so when it's actually happening, it is common for markets to sell off. Now, the key is going to be, it might mean that Mr. Modi is not going to do what he says, and people know he's not going to do it. Or it just might be the typical reaction of sell on the news. My inclination at the moment is it is just the typical buy on the rumor, sell on the news. I hope it does not mean that Mr. Modi has just been talking and he's not going to do anything. That would not be good for him. That would not be good for India. It would not be good for him.
Okay, let me bring in another very well-known voice on the markets and on this question of a market derating in the short term, possibly on account of the risk on India going up. Punita Kumar Sinha, managing partner and CIO at Pacific Paradigm Advisors. Punita, welcome to the show. We have Jim with us. I'm asking you the same question. Has the India risk gone up, and will this further keep FIIs, for example, on the sidelines?
So I would say in the short term, yes. Until the new government is formed, there will be a lot of speculation and back and forth. So that could only last maybe a week at most. And during that time, I think market volatility will be quite high. But even after the new government is formed, I would say that, I expect it will be BJP-led. It will be an NDA government, but it would be a slightly different shape than it has been in the past. Maybe with less boldness. The reform process may be less bold. There may be a reallocation of priorities to areas where the BJP has felt it has lost elections, and the analysis would give them some insights as to areas of priorities that may shift some of the economic agenda. But I don't think it's about foreign investors' role in the Indian market that is going to determine what the Indian market does, because the Indian market is a flush with capital, domestic capital, and that domestic capital doesn't have any place to invest in other than Indian assets. So if money shifts a little bit from equity markets to, say, cash goes into the banks, and the banking system will get a lot more cash, and hopefully that will help them increase their loan book at some point. And so I think the economy will continue to benefit from the domestic capital, regardless of what the foreign investors do. And the one other thing I would like to add is that the foreign investors have no rush, no reason to rush into India at the moment. So, because there are many other markets that they can invest in with better valuations. So, I think they will want the dust to settle before they rush in.
That's a good point there. And Jim Rogers, Punita, was making the point about if Modi does what he has promised to do. The question I want to ask you before I go to Jim again and get both of you in is that, do you think the economic trajectory we have seen in the past 10 years is likely to change the broad pillars of the momentum that we have seen in the Indian economy, giving us 8.2% in the most recent fiscal year? Is there going to be a significant change in that?
Well, the Indian demographic story is still very strong. The demand is going to stay. The consumer effect, financialization, digitization, there are many, many strong trends that are now in place regardless of any government intervention. So I think those trends will continue to propel the Indian economy upwards strongly. Of course, there could be some, as I said, capital reallocation, perhaps from manufacturing into some other areas, or certain sectors of the economy may see a slight slowdown. But there are some very, I would say, anything consumer oriented is got its own inherent momentum, and that will not change.
Jim, tell me, one of the key things about the market, Indian market and its valuations, was that while valuations are expensive given corporate earnings, one of the arguments made for these expensive valuations was the political stability and the policy certainty that India has had in the past 10 years. Do you think these assumptions are now under question, Jim Rogers?
Well, I repeat, my question as an international investor is, okay, is he going to open up even more? Is it going to make it easy for foreign investors to invest in India? Look at Japan in the past 50 years. Look at Korea in the past 50 years. Look at Canada. Look at Australia. Look at many markets. It's very easy for foreigners to invest in these markets. India is very attractive. Is he going to make it easy or not?
Punita, the question that Jim is asking is are things going to get easier for investors from here on, given the likely contours of the mandate?
Oh, I mean, I don't think that will change from where we are. There is certain regulations and rules in place that are already in place, right, for foreign investors and how they invest. And so that making it easier is not going to change, in my view. I think what will change is the view of the foreign investors themselves on India, and whether these valuations are attractive enough as compared to other places where they can invest, and where the policy thrust may gather a little bit more momentum. So, for instance, whether it is, India's benefited hugely from the loss of China's growth momentum. And if there is the reforms in China, happen a little bit more strongly, then some capital will definitely go there, because the valuation mismatch the disparity between India and China valuations is huge. But India, as I said, has its own strong driver for secular growth in place. Yes, on the margin, the government could be, I think If it's a BJP-led government, which I believe it will be, then maybe they'll be not as bold as they've been in the past. And if it is, for whatever reason, the India Alliance somehow manages to put together a government, they probably already have an agenda which is also a little bit more populist in nature, but they too will want to prove themselves, and so they could be quite bold. So I think either which way, the marginal difference is going to be relatively marginal.
Okay, one of the key questions that I want to come to you on, Jim, is on the impact on gold over the next 3 to 6 months. What do you sense happening as far as gold is concerned? That's a subject that you know very, very well, and in the past, our interactions, your comments on gold have always been taken very seriously by investors in India.
Well, I would suggest you look at silver. Silver is down 30 or 40% from its all-time high. Gold is at its all-time high. I would buy silver. In fact, I bought some silver yesterday. Maybe I should buy more now. I am more bullish on silver than gold. I own both, but I would prefer silver. And the Indians helped teach me about silver. If you go to Indian markets, oh my gosh, there's a huge amount of silver in India because you've been smart enough to buy it over the centuries.
Okay, that's an important point. Punita, which pockets in India do you think are likely to deliver solid returns now, assuming that this is the political scenario and Modi 3.0 comes in with a weaker mandate, given that where will returns come from over the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, the market's correcting quite rapidly, like today, and if it continues to correct like this until government is formed, then the whole valuation story could make certain sectors that I'm talking about today look quite different. Like, let's say there's another 30% fall in some sectors or stocks between now and the next 1 week, then the valuations of those will begin to look quite attractive. So I think in a very, very fast moving market, I wouldn't want to bet on what might do well, because there could be a rebound as well. But I would say in general, it would be safer to invest in sectors that have lagged and that are defensive in nature, at least for the next few months, which includes FMCG, which includes pharma, because pharma is really a US growth story, not so much only India. I would say IT, where valuations are attractive, focus more on what's happening in the US there. And then maybe I think real estate might still do well. So there, as I said, anything that's a financialization, digitization, that is not going to change. So I think maybe capex, infra, manufacturing, PSUs, the policy-induced sectors is where you might want to take a little bit of a backseat.
Okay, policy-induced sectors and a little bit of a backseat. Jim, I come to you for the global scenario. How do you see the markets panning out globally? We are seeing what's happening with inflation in the United States and the Fed stance. And between now and November, when the big US election happens and the results come out, the markets will be watching, investors will be watching the Fed action quite closely. What's your sense as to how interest rate trajectory is likely to stay in the United States, for example, Jim Rogers?
Well, the U.S. market has been going up for 14 years, which is the longest in American history. Never in American history has the market been this good this long. So I can see the signs. I'm not selling short in America, but I see the signs that it's going to come to an end later this year. And when that happens, it's going to be a very big correction in the U.S. because the debt is so unbelievably high. We had a problem in 2008 because of too much debt. Since then, oh my gosh, the debt has skyrocketed in the U.S. So when we have a bear market in the U.S. again, probably later this year or next, it's going to be very bad because the debt is unbelievably high.
Well, that's an important point, a bear market in the US, and some Indian investors would say that today was a day clearly where the bears had it, had the whole day. We are also joined by one of the most well-known voices on the political economy in India, and I want to ask Shankkar Aiyar, political economy analyst and a regular at the India Today group. Shankkar, welcome to this debate. We have Jim Rogers, the famous investor, and Punita Kumar Sinha with us. And the question that I want to ask you, what is the most likely scenario that you are seeing right now as far as the next government is concerned? What will that shape be? Who will lead that government? What's your sense at this stage?
The path to power seems to be paved for Mr. Modi and the NDA as of now. And I think that there will be some adjustments that will be needed to be made, because Chandrababu Naidu and of the TDP and Mr. Nitish Kumar of the JDU will have more than a few things to share with Mr. Modi on the final formations and how they. So those conversations will happen. Maybe one of them has happened, because I believe Prime Minister Modi has spoken to Mr. Naidu already. And then there are the internal dynamics of the party. There will be, all of this will take place after tonight. This will be the night of the long knives in the party for sure.
Shankkar, is this going to be a strong government that comes in?
Well, with Mr. Modi, 272 is 372 and 472. So as long as he has the number of people supporting him, the numbers with him, he will function the way. But the approach, the strategy, all of it. Even before this, I was here with you yesterday and we spoke about what could be the next focus, and I did mention that there will be an attempt to change the capital gains format, the period, the tenure thing, and there will be one big welfare program that will come through, because they will try and use the extra dividend or the bonanza that they've got from the RBI. So I feel that Mr. Modi will make an attempt to assuage those who have been disenchanted. There will be a program for jobs. There will be an attempt to design something national. I suspect the income support schemes will have a further boost. Maybe the income support schemes for women, which are there in about 8 or 9 states now, might go national. If you remember, Siddharth, the farmer income support scheme started in Odisha and in Telangana and sort of went national. So I suspect that a similar thing could happen here.
Absolutely. The Raitu Bandhu was perhaps the start along with Odisha, but Shankkar, we also saw a reversal in Odisha. Jim, one final comment before I let you go, as other voices, including Madan Sabnavis, the chief economist at the Bank of Baroda, who has joined us. Jim, one final comment. A rocky road ahead as far as the Indian markets are concerned, or do you think it's just going to be a small bump and things will be fine very, very soon?
Well, if Mr. Modi does what he says and emphasizes manufacturing in India, it's going to change the world. It's going to change India dramatically, and it's going to change the world. You have many smart, intelligent, educated people who can manufacture. If he does it, if he gives the incentives, the tax incentives, it's going to change the world. If he doesn't, the market's going to go down a lot.
Jim Rogers, thank you very much. And as you leave us, I am once again repeating what Shankkar Aiyar said. With Mr. Modi, 272 is 372. We are also joined by the editor of Business Today, Saurav Majumdar. Welcome, Madan Sabnavis. Welcome, Saurav. As Jim leaves us, Punita Kumar Sinha is still with us. Madan, your first thoughts and the big question that's hanging in the air. Shankkar says there is a Modi 3.0 with a sort of different NDA constitution clearly, but what about the economic trajectory? Leave the markets aside for today. What do you sense will happen as far as the economic priorities are concerned, and is there a 100-day agenda, and is that the 100-day agenda that is supposed to be there, perhaps that is going to be rewritten quite a bit, Madan.
Actually, Siddharth, I was not able to get your question. Can you just repeat
Okay.
it?
Now, perhaps my throat is packing up because I have been at it since the morning. But Madan, I was saying, what sort of economic trajectory is likely to be adopted by the new government?
Yeah, actually, we're looking at the economic trajectory. I think we are going to be on a similar path what was there earlier. We should remember that as far as the government is concerned, I think within its own realm, if I look at, say, the budget, I think whatever can be done, whatever was being done earlier can be persevered with. I don't see any issue as far as the government is concerned. This will be both in terms of any kind of tax incentives which need to be given in order to spur, say, consumption or even, for that matter, investment. Even in terms of expenditure, given the fact that the government has had this bounty of 2.1 lakh crores coming from the Reserve Bank of India, it actually gives them a lot of elbow room in order to maneuver with the budgetary numbers. And therefore, either one choice is, of course, you reduce the fiscal deficit number. If there are certain compulsions to spend more on social welfare, that can be done. You want to spend more on capital expenditure, that can also be done. So I think that irrespective of the way in which this particular government is formed, I think budgetary formulation, which will be the first major policy decision taken by the government, should not really be a problem because of the very sweet spot in which the Indian economy is in. The economy is doing well. I think that's the major part. External sector is strong, inflation coming down, growth on the part of 7.5%, 8%. I think all these things go very well for the government when it has to take policies in terms of income expenditure. The only areas, Siddharth, where I think they will need deep conversation, discussions with the coalition partners will be on issues which have been pending so long. When I say these pending issues, for example, anything to do with agriculture, anything to do with land reforms or labor reforms, I think these issues have been pending. We don't have easy solutions, but any step taken in that direction would also mean having discussions with the coalition partners.
Saurav Majumdar, do you think reforms are at risk? In the recent past, Saurav, on our shows, we've been discussing whether there will be more moves, for example, on land, or the stalled agriculture reform, or even a labor privatization, IDBI Bank just as one example, asset monetization, for example. Do you think all of that is at risk?
Yes, Siddhartha, I think I've just before the coming on the show, I was speaking to some fund managers and some investors and private equity players. They seem to feel that definitely there will be a pause at this point from an investor point of view. Because investors clearly do not like, and we discussed this last evening as well, they do not like uncertainty. Not that there is much uncertainty about the overall trajectory of this government, but this, remember, the new government is likely, and I underscore the word likely to be a coalition government led by the current dispensation. Now, when you have coalition partners of the likes of Mr. Naidu and Nitish Kumar, etc., there will be discussions, as was just mentioned, and there are some, the key part will be who gets the key economic ministries. That will determine a lot of things. How much the coalition partners able to extract from the current government, from the BJP. I think that is going to be also a lot of things which will determine in which way the reform trajectory will go. See, broadly, I think the secular direction that there will be reform. There are some reforms which are cannot be undone. Those are all done. Much of that is actually taken place. But going forward, the pending reform agenda like labor reform, like agri reforms, etc., the disinvestment piece, for instance, those definitely will need discussions, and therefore some delays may be expected. And that is something which will be worrying investors going forward for the next few weeks and months at least.
Hang in there, because all of you have given me several questions to ask, and at this stage I want to introduce Arvind Sanger, the managing partner of Geosphere Capital Management. Arvind, was this an outcome that you were factoring in at all? Because no one in the market seemed to have actually factored in this kind of an outcome, and especially given that the number two in the government had at one point in the campaign said, please buy, and buy heavily before the 4th of June. And today we saw everybody selling.
Well, I think that FIIs were actually a little cautious coming into the election day, but I think after the exit polls, a lot of the FIIs, covered their shorts and maybe got a little more optimistic. Clearly, I've never seen exit polls be that wrong. But I mean, I think the real question now is, what's ahead? And I think, as some of your panelists have already been talking, uncertainty is a huge negative. And I suspect fiscal discipline is going to be much harder in terms of coalition politics and having to satisfy all the different constituencies. So I think that the uncertainty and the questions about fiscal discipline versus more spending to help kind of the rural distress that seems to have been an underlying theme, and job creation might become orders of the day. Will there be more spending on Narega? Will there be more deficits? Well, will there be more inflationary impulse? All of these are things that we have to look at, worry about, and plan for in terms of what that means for the near-term economic outlook. I think, look, at the end of the day, investors in India for the companies and their competence and their ability to deliver, but the macroeconomic situation is going to look a lot less certain than what we have been counting for.
Arvind, how long will the macroeconomy weigh on corporate performance, on earnings, 12 to 14%? And I wonder if you have a view on the corporate earnings outlook in the current year. But how long will the macro weigh on the broader stock market, given that we have state elections coming up, and these pressures that we saw manifest in the Lok Sabha elections for the ruling party are certainly going to play out in states like Maharashtra, Arvind?
Well, I think, unfortunately, one of the things that this election may have thrown up is voters in India like freebies, which means that more deficit spending, more, as I've said before. So the macroeconomic situation is going to be a challenge. And what that means for inflation, and RBI is probably going to have to stay tighter for longer and to guard against inflationary impulse. So I think all of that certainly means that the growth outlook at a macroeconomic level is going to be somewhat more challenged. So we'll have to find companies that are less dependent. I think there's been this euphoria about PSUs. I think that's an area that we certainly have not been part of. And I think that's another area that is going to suffer, because if you need national service, as we call it, private sector to do, one of the easy ways to do it is to use the PSUs as a piggy bank in terms of, oil marketing companies lowering prices. There are many things you can do with PSUs to take profits out of their pockets and make it available for the public good, if I may call it that. And so us, people who invest in PSUs are going to have to worry about that. So there's many things in the market that can change in a coalition where there's a need to keep appeasing voters, because, like you said, there are more state elections and other elections coming up, which make it necessary to do what is necessary to try to win elections.
Arvind, I'll come back to you on your sense of what sectors could be in favor once the dust settles. But very quickly to you, Shankkar, and this came up earlier. Do you think a genuine coalition is going to be good for growth? Because let's also underline that these 10 years, the NDA was in power, but very clearly with a very, very sort of bullish BJP at the core of it. And I compare that with 10 years previously of Manmohan Singh, a minority government in many ways. Do you think a genuine coalition is likely to be good for growth, as some people have said in the past?
Well, let's split this question into two parts. One is the political aspect and the other is the economic aspect. The political aspect is very simple, that history shows us that a large number of reforms in India have come despite the governments being in coalition. Now, it's fair to say the 1991 reforms, as I've written earlier, came at the result as a compulsion because of a crisis. But the other reforms that followed didn't necessarily come on the back of a crisis or some compulsion, but things got done in between 1999 and 2004. The Vajpayee government promoted privatization. They cleaned up the banks. They brought down interest rates. In fact, till date, the lowest interest rates regime was during the Vajpayee government period. And thereafter, then the UPA came and they rode on the global growth and took the GDP to 9+% for 3 years in a row. And whether we sort of say it so or not, the last 10 years also have been coalitions of some sort, because the BJP was in coalition with other parties. So I don't think coalitions is necessarily a bad thing. I think coalitions can deliver growth. The issue that we must sort of separate from this is India's current economic position. We have on a terribly good place to work with. We have the right mix of clean balance sheets in the corporates, clean bank balance sheets, strong macro fundamentals, and we should be able to build on this. Now,
but will that building happen? That's a big question. Punita, I just want to come to you on a point. Do you think that in the first 5 years and subsequently as well, despite COVID, there have been various times in the first two Modi administrations where the government had a bonanza, but critics said that it had been quite tight-fisted, including, for example, on some relief to the middle class on taxation. This government gave the corporates a big tax break, hoping that private sector investment would start. The middle class really didn't get it. There was this encouragement to go towards a new tax regime because it withdrew all incentives. Do you think that's also bitten them in the verdict?
Yeah, I think actually that's been kind of the nature of Indian politics, is that all political parties tend to be pro-corporate and pro-poor. And the middle class always gets a bit neglected. Even when I compare the tax regime in India, at least on the estate tax and dividend tax, etc., compared to what you see in developed markets like US, it's pretty benign here for the ultra rich as compared to some of the other developed countries. And where does that and you have to keep the minorities happy. And we've seen in this election that the minorities have been the swing voters in a way. They are the ones where we seem to have, BJP seems to have lost vote share. So whoever now is going to be in the government is going to start appeasing more of the minorities, more of the rural sector, focus on job creation. And if you're not going to change the tax regime for the ultra rich, then where is that going to come from? That is going to come from the middle class. And our fiscal deficit levels are already, pretty high versus what the discipline requires us to be. So those are things that I think one will have to watch.
Madan Sabnavis, this point was touched upon earlier during the day and on this show as well. And, is fiscal consolidation given, or should we now be prepared for some slippages, or let me say more elbow room being given as far as the fiscal is concerned?
Looking at fiscal consolidation, it's a medium-term kind of goal. See, immediately we have a goal of saying that by 25-26, we need to move to 4.5% mark. We should remember that the fiscal deficit actually overshot during COVID time, and that was done at a time when it was more a case of revenue falling rather than there being any kind of unnecessary expenditure. In fact, the thrust or the onus of any kind of COVID relief was actually on the Reserve Bank of India rather than on the fiscal balances. So today, when we're talking of fiscal consolidation, we're really saying that we're going towards 4.5% and probably to 3% subsequently. And the way in which the economy has behaved, I think that is very important. The economy has been doing rather well in the last 3 years. So we have the denominator effect, which has ensured that the fiscal deficit ratio is gliding towards that 4.5% mark. And I think given that we do expect that the Indian economy will continue to do the way in which it's performing, that is, we're talking of a 7.5 to 8% growth rate in the next couple of years, this also means that we have that much of space to go in for certain kind of expenditures. Now, what kind of expenditures they would be? Ideally, we would as economists, we pitch for capital expenditure, but given the political economy, there would be need for one to go in for social welfare also. I think that's how you really balance the two things. How much of it will be pure economic, how much will be political economy, and I think we have enough space for that. So I'm quite hopeful and sanguine and positive about this entire thing of fiscal consolidation, notwithstanding the fact that we are probably going to have a coalition government. There could be pressures to focus more on social welfare. I think it can be done. The Indian economy is doing well. We are large enough, and these kind of things can be absorbed.
Okay. I just want to also give you a sense of where the results tally stands. It's been on the screen all throughout, but as far as the NDA is concerned, 294 is a number that it seems to have settled at, 294.95. As far as the INDI alliance is concerned, 231 is the number. There have been many upsets through the day, but the bigger one obviously being the NDA number. I'm coming to you, Arvind, and I want to ask you from an emerging market perspective, how does India look like to a foreign investor from today onwards?
Well, the attractiveness of India is that it's had one of the best growth stories globally. And I don't think the growth story itself is significantly changed with this election result. But the other thing that India has had has been policy certainty. So the policy certainty angle has become a little more cloudy. So in that sense, if everything else being equal, it's a slight negative. But I think the main attraction of India has been the diverse sectors that you have, the entrepreneurs, the companies with strong focus on returns. And so we invest in companies, we don't invest in governments. And in that sense, India has an underlying demographic growth story which still remains intact. And I think, focusing a little more on employment creation cannot be bad for the economy or for investors. So in that sense, I don't think it changes dramatically, but at the margin, it became a little less attractive, in the last 24 hours because of the greater policy uncertainty. But, as some of your panelists have just said, India has lived through coalition politics before, and it's not the end of the world. It's just that we'll have to adjust to a new normal, and that new normal might take, a few weeks, few months to get clarity on what that new normal is, what the dispensation is. Because, I'll be honest with you, having watched Prime Minister Modi for a long time as a chief minister and as a prime minister, I'm not sure how good he is at coalition politics. How is he going to play it? This is not his persona. So in terms of how this plays out and how, stable or otherwise the coalition politics is, we're comparing Vajpayee with Modi. The two personalities couldn't be more different. So we'll have to see.
Arvind, that's an important point, because I wanted to go to Saurav and Madan, but please bear with me. Shankkar, you want to answer that question, because Arvind Sanger is asking a very important point. He's making the point that he doesn't know, having observed and seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that how good is he at coalition politics. Do you want to answer that, because that might further inform the debate?
So there is this perception that the BJP is a monolith. It is not. When he took over as chief minister in 2002, there were three BJP parties in one party in 2002. One was dominated by the VHP, one by the RSS, and one was the regular party. Over a period of 12 years, he uniformed them and sort of disciplined staff and made changes. Even in 2014, he had the Shiv Sena and other parties with him, and he has a direct way of doing things, and he has a persuasive way of doing things. So it remains to be seen what exactly will be demanded by the two new allies, which is the JDU, which has come on board recently again, and the TDP. Now, mind you, both these states, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, have been clamoring for special status. So it is possible that now that they have got their pound of flesh, they might want to extract some more. On the policy front, I wanted to make this point that India has so far rolled on the first C, which is capex. but India's second C, which is consumption, has lagged. If you look at the GDP figures, the private final consumption is barely half of the GDP number. Even in GVA numbers, it's pretty low. So there is no harm in propping up consumption. The question is how effectively you do, what is the range that you put, how do you want to do it, and what outcomes you want to desire. So I don't think it's such a bad idea for Mr. Modi to get some consultative process going on this. I mean, this has been pretty much my way or the other way kind of story in the last couple of years. So there will be some consultative process involved in this. I think he understands the need for conservatism far better than most others. Mr. Chandrababu Naidu has been seen in previous avatar as Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh as a reform-oriented guy.
And he's quite positive for the IT sector.
And for the IT sector and on manufacturing. The question is whether they are able to complement each other, leverage each other's strengths to make policy run.
Okay. Before I thank Punita Kumar Sinha, just one final question to you, Punita. Is the correction done and dusted in the sense of we saw very, very deep correction today? Do you think some more sanity will prevail as markets open tomorrow and during the course of this week?
I think correction also means sanity, right? So in my view, if there is a correction, that will be a healthy entry point for future investors. So I think until the government is formed, there'll be a lot of volatility. But one thing to keep in mind is that India has been the second best performing market over a long 20-year period, only second to the US in dollar terms. So over long periods of time, India's inherent consumption, inherent demographics will always, and our domestic capital will always be there. Short term, there could be a lot more volatility, but I also call that sanity.
Okay, I'm reminded of that dialogue which has contributed to a million memes. Dar acha lagta hai. And for the markets, some bit of dar is always good. My colleagues in the PCR tell me that we have to wind up in 2 minutes and take a break, but I'll go to both Saurav and Madan very, very quickly on that. Madan, to you, not because you work for a PSU bank, but the PSU banking index got hammered today. And you know, all the good work that thousands and hundreds of thousands of bank employees, the government on governance, everything from an investor perspective seems to have been wiped off. Are the markets overreacting and you know beating down the PSU banks for pretty much no reason really?
No, I think I would guess it's quite irrational. And what happened yesterday, first going up and now coming down. I think ever since we had the exit polls predicting a certain kind of result, which hasn't quite materialized today, I think we have seen irrational behavior on both the days. And I think this will probably continue for a few more sessions until there's more certainty as far as the composition of the government goes.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do with the performance as such of banks. I think public sector banks continue to do very well and do deserve high valuations.
Absolutely. And come the results of the current quarter, the first quarter, Saurav, perhaps this day will be forgotten because then earnings, reduction in bad debt, credit growth, deposit growth is what is going to drive the debate on PSU banks and not the likelihood of some other thing happening. Saurav, we'll slip into a short break, but before I let you go, I can't but ask you about the Adani-Ambani pack and chiefly Adani. What a roller coaster of a ride it has been on the market for the entire Adani pack. Again, is it overreaction? What do investors seem to be fearing?
I would think it is an overreaction in terms of the immediate response to this government not getting, the BJP not getting a majority on its own. I think that is there, but I feel at some point over the next few days and weeks, that will sort of settle down. I mean, if they have weathered Hindenburg, I think they can, the Adani pack will weather this battering at some point in the future. But one thing I wanted to talk about, Siddharth, quickly before we head get into the break, is the fact that, we cannot underestimate Narendra Modi, the astute politician, talking of how he will manage the coalition. Please remember, this is Narendra Modi's tryst with history as well. So he will do everything in his power to ensure that the government which he heads, a coalition government, functions with the buy-in of the coalition partners. A little give and take will have to be done, and I think Narendra Modi, while he has been this muscular, aggressive politician all these years, and we know him as that, he will be astute enough to understand things have changed. And it will be good if some of these things translate into consumption expenditure, in terms of consumption demand reviving, in terms of the bottom of the pyramid, not being so stressed as was clearly the result of the poll is shown. I mean, that there is a stress at the bottom of the pyramid. If some of these things can be addressed in a coalition government, I mean, why should anybody have any concerns about whether the government will, work the right way or not?
Absolutely, and the results have thrown up a negative surprise as far as the markets are concerned, but it seems that the ruling NDA is set to return, but with a reduced majority. And as the experts on our panel right now have been telling us viewers, that might not be that much of a bad thing. So we perhaps need to look beyond just the immediate into a more medium-term horizon. I'm going to thank all my guests on the panel for their time and patience with us today. We'll be back after just a small break. Do stay tuned into Business Today Television. I'll see you again. But is that too much of a hope at this stage as far as the markets are concerned?
Morning, Siddharth. Thank you for having me on. And you notice to your response of good morning, I just said morning. I took the good out of it. But that being said, I think obviously, the movie hasn't played out as the trailer was shown to us over the weekend. But Siddharth, I think I'm going to probably tell you something that maybe nobody else on your channel has, told you so far. And I think this is a larger point. And Siddharth, I think you and I at one point, probably just crossed each other at Bloomberg UTV a long time back.
Yes.
And, I know you're very well connected to policymakers. I think this is a point to be taken home. Could the election have not ended a day earlier instead of Saturday on Friday? And could the election results have not been announced yesterday instead of today? Yeah, allowing the markets to go up on an exit poll yesterday and allowing them to fall today. I'm not saying that anyone knew the election outcome, but why gamble or why, keep that window open for the public to be subject to such volatility? I think it is utter senselessness. This could have been better managed so that you did not have to, go through this exuberance, because I'll tell you, Siddharth, even though my business is institutions and I only deal with large institutional investors, there were so many people who called me yesterday between my family and friends.
Welcome back to Business Today Television. What a long day it has been on the markets today, and many participants on the market would have been actually very happy when the tick by tick stopped at 3:30 p.m. today, because it's been a sea of red, a bloodbath on Dalal Street, a bloodbath that's been triggered by a negative surprise, and a negative surprise that was very unexpected as far as the projections given by the exit polls were concerned. But that's behind us, and as the markets and economic participants are wont to do, they always look ahead. And to do that look ahead as to what does a weaker mandate mean, what does this negative surprise mean, what does it mean for the markets, for the economy, for taxpayers, for the infrastructure sector and everything else to do with the economy, I have with me Saurabh Majumdar, the editor of Business Today. We are also joined by Vinayak Chatterjee, infrastructure expert. And as we continue our rolling coverage, we'll be joined by other expert voices. Vinayak, welcome. Before I get into our infrastructure deep dive, I want you to, go back into your experience of so many years and to tell our viewers who look at the economic side of things, par for the course or a major speed breaker as far as India's economic journey is concerned?
No. Par for the course. I think we should celebrate the vibrancy of India's democracy. I don't think there's going to be any major structural shift in India's economy, whether it is finance or industry or infrastructure, because there is a natural momentum to many of the policies which broadly are very, very logical. So I am not particularly concerned about any major structural shifts, but would put my money on continuing with the ongoing momentum which the whole world is seeing. Over to you.
Okay, ongoing economic momentum, and on that note, I also want to introduce Subhash Garg, former Finance Secretary and one of the most well-known voices on the macroeconomy and other matters. Saurav, before we go to Mr. Garg in terms of getting to ask him what is the economic trajectory likely to be, I want you to reflect on a point that we were discussing before the break. Reliance Industries, and we can try and bring that stock up along with Adani stock. So there's also been this sentiment reversal for major bellwether stocks, including RIL, for example. Again, is this just too much being made of a changed political situation, and business fundamentals, earnings, expansion will continue for these large conglomerates?
I think, Siddharth, we should not have any doubt on the overall trajectory of corporate India's growth. So I think these will be, irrational exuberance is one side of the markets, irrational fear and, selling is the other side. And we've seen this in our careers. I don't think we should be worried about this. This is understandable because, there were expectations yesterday because of the exit polls that this would be a, done deal and it would be a clean sweep. But that has not happened. So obviously the markets will be jittery and markets will be hit by a setback, and there are people who are expecting, because it's a coalition, there will be some sort of saw a pause at least on some of the reforms before the new government gets its act together, talks to its coalition partners. So I don't see, as far as whether it is Reliance or any other big corporate houses or corporate results, that being so much of a concern. However, I want to ask Mr. Chatterjee, who's on our panel, one important point. Mr. Chatterjee, if I may be allowed to ask you, one of the key themes of Modi 2.2 has been infrastructure spending, big money being pumped into infrastructure. Do you think that the coalition government, which will now likely to take over, will sort of go slightly easier on that, or do you think that is a continuing story and cannot be reversed or even paused?
No, I will tell you very frankly, I think, in all fairness, many sectors of the economy are still to show robust growth, like agriculture and manufacturing. And for the last 2 terms or the last decade, since 2014, the NDA government has banked on infrastructure, public expenditure to pump prime economic growth. And there is, it was shared, and Mr. Garg will know this, there was a confidential note with the current bureaucracy in the Finance Secretary after Mr. Garg has left, which was shown to me, which said that every 1 rupee spent on infrastructure results in 3 rupees of GDP, and 1 rupee spent on direct benefit transfer of any kind results in 90 paisa of GDP. So whichever formation comes to set up the government, their prime concern will be to keep the momentum on GDP going. And the real pump primer of the economy is infrastructure spend. So I have no doubt in my mind at all, to answer your question, that actually whichever government comes to power does not have a choice. They will have to keep pump priming the economy till such time as there is clear evidence that other sectors are kicking in a much heavier manner than they have in the past, including investment. I hope that answers your question.
Well, that's a good point, and the point of how infrastructure delivers 3x returns versus 0.9 returns on DBT. Mr. Garg, please join the debate. And I don't know where to start with you, but the question that I've been putting on the panel is India's economic trajectory, policy architecture at the center level now in for a reset, or will things continue more or less the same?
So thank you, Siddharth. I think some of the key messages in the election results, we must take note of that first. Because in my judgment, that will decide what the economic and non-economic priorities of the government would be. One of that is that BJP is not at 272 marks. It's actually at about 240, 245, which is much smaller for a leader like Narendra Modi to actually sort of have his way without any sort of question or doubt. That transforms the way the policies would be made henceforth. That's one. Second is the partners which the NDA has now, which have got very material influence in times to come. Both Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar has about 15 seats each. That makes formidable 30 seats in the NDA family, so to say. Their concerns, their priorities, their political ambitions would need to be accommodated. These two have a very big bearing. I can say this, having worked with Prime Minister Modi for quite some time. While he is a immensely energetic and forward-looking leader with enormous capacity to take bold decisions, there are two important elements which need to be taken note of. One is that he is a great centralizer. He centralizes the decisions into his hand, and it is his will or decision which must finally prevail. That is a different implications for a coalition kind of government than a single party dominant government. That's one. And second, he has sort of, and this has happened earlier in Indira Gandhi's time as well, where most of the institutions of the country had been staffed with people who are very much loyalists or have that thinking which resonates with the Prime Minister's thinking. This has made them most of the time say what pleases the Prime Minister or what goes. So I don't think these would be very comfortably placed as far as these two big allies are concerned. So I think first decision which we must watch for is that who is leading the NDA government? Is Prime Minister with his makeup willing to lead a coalition government, unlike what he has done for last 10 years? Or someone, and what kind of deal which is struck with these two guys, I think that will decide. Now, coming back to your sort of question and what Vinayak was also emphasizing on infrastructure spending, so to say, while there is no doubt that infrastructure spending is extremely important for growth, I don't agree with this conclusion that the kind of infrastructure spending which we are doing in the country adds 3 rupees to the output than what the redistribution expenditure does. The quality and the character of our infrastructure spending is that a good deal, roughly about 25% of the capex has gone for the railways. And Vinayak, I would suggest you look at the data. Despite this spending, the not only the share of railways in both passenger and goods traffic is going down, its contribution to as GVA, which is what the economic output is, has actually reduced over last 4-5 years than it was even there, which tells me that every infrastructure spending is not necessarily very great. On the first round, you do have a very beneficial impact in terms of higher steel, cement, and other goods production and services production. But if that capital which is invested does not lead to higher production in times to come, then that capex is not in the long term that beneficial. It's not true for the roads. I think roads are far more productive, but it is also true for the spending like the metros, which are socially desirable, but in terms of economic benefits is much smaller. I just stop by saying certain kind of capex, like if you invest enormous amount in a telecom entity like BSNL, which is losing amounts after amounts, loads and loads of losses, about 10,000 crores every year, that infrastructure spending is actually a waste. So we will need to see how this new government, whichever its way it is formed, will have to take a much more nuanced and critical view about what kind of infrastructure spending is actually done.
Mr. Garg, just hold on, and before I go to Saurav, he has a question for you. I want to introduce Narendra Taneja, noted. Okay, we will get to Narendra Taneja once he comes in. He's been waiting on the sidelines for quite some time now. But Saurav, the question that Mr. Garg raises: who will be the leader of this government, and is it likely to be a stable coalition? Go ahead. You had an interjection with Mr. Garg.
Yes, Siddharth, thank you. Mr. Garg, I wanted to ask you, the message clearly, as many analysts have pointed out over the course of the day, this weaker mandate in that sense is also somewhere a reflection of the rural distress, the pressures and this disconnect and dissatisfaction at the bottom of the pyramid. And that's an important message which this government seems to be, the people seem to be having given this government. Now, my question to you is, having been in the government and observed it for so long, and the fact that the fiscal deficit is within range, the path to fiscal consolidation is very clearly laid out by the government and in previous budgets. Do you see that there is there will be, because of the verdict, some move towards slight bit of populism in trying to do some of these things, address some of these concerns, and therefore whether we will remain on the path of fiscal consolidation or make it a little bit easier to spend in these areas?
So thank you very much. I think this is a very important question. The fiscal consolidation, which currently seems to be we assume that we are in the fiscal consolidation phase. Even when we run 5.6% of fiscal deficit or 5.1 for the next year as projected, these, in my judgment, are very large fiscal deficit. If you go back to even Mr. Modi's first term, in the first term, the fiscal deficit on average was about 3.4, 3.5. And now the second term has averaged over 6%. These are very high level of fiscal deficit, run basically because we had a massive capex program, and also the redistribution welfare expenditures had expanded substantially. You saw what happened on the food subsidies, you saw what is happening on the fertilizer subsidies, you also saw the programs like PM Kisan, etc. being expanded substantially. So and I must point out this, you mentioned about the rural distress and the income distress in people. I think this is very much clear in the data itself. 5 years growth of consumption in India is less than 4.5%, while capex growth has been, or the gross fixed.
Okay, I think we seem to be having some audio issues with Mr. Garg. I'll come back to him right away. Let me also introduce Narendra Taneja, who's back with us. Narendra, apologies for making you wait. These are the perils of non-stop rolling coverage. But the question for you that I had was, and this is something that the panel has been raising, former Finance Secretary raised this, Subhash Garg, who is still with us. Who will be the leader in your view of the new government, and is it likely to be a stable one? Because the tally at 296 for the NDA, but the BJP well short of 272 on its own, Narendra Taneja.
You see, the coalition government is nothing new for BJP and for that matter for India. We saw Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, which delivered very successfully, was a very popular government. You know what happened, we all know what happened in 2004, that's a different story. But then the UPA 1 and UPA 2, again coalition governments. Here, I really don't see, I think India is used to it and political parties are used to working together. And if you look at the history, of BJP in particular, first, there is no debate on this that who is going to be the leader. Of course, Prime Minister Modi will continue to lead the party, continue to lead the coalition and also the government. But in terms of, having, working out, call it chemistry or call it, a deal with TDP and Nitish Kumar ji and others and all that, I really don't think there's going to be a big challenge. Of course, they're going to be tough, negotiation, no doubt about that, but there's politics. But at the same time, Nitish Kumar ji knows very well in Bihar, he needs BJP because at the end of the day, he also wants to see the growth of his own party. And TDP, Chandrababu Naidu is known for economic reforms. He's the man who changed Hyderabad, the face of Hyderabad. And in terms of
Narendra, he also lost power after that and had to stay on a very, very long banvas. His banvas was an extended banvas.
Yeah, but what I was talking about was basically the DNA compatibility in terms how you look at India's future, India's economic potential and all that. So that's
absolutely point taken. He's the guy from at least from the administrative side and the politics who actually became a champion for IT. So while you had the likes of Infosys and TCS quietly doing their job, he became the first original champion of IT. Narendra Taneja, one more point that the panel said before we were able to finally come to you. The instincts of the Prime Minister to be able to work well with coalition partners who have a significant say. And remember, viewers, that it's not just the TDP having a stake in the center. They pulled off quite a big upset in their home state as well. So Narendra Taneja, tell us, how will Prime Minister Modi flex in this new coalition? What is the kind of flex that he will adopt?
I think, the reading of those who think that Prime Minister can't lead a coalition, can't lead a group of people who've got different kind of way of thinking, different political culture, is not correct. Look at BJP carefully. I mean, there's so many people who are in the key positions. Either they've been part of other political parties or they have not been in politics at all. And they are also sitting on CCS, another, platform. So, they work very well. Look at Jyotiradittya Scindia, look at, for instance, the former foreign secretary, hugely successful foreign minister, and there's so many others. So I don't really think that's a politician. Mr. Modi, at the end of the day, is a politician. And at the same time, he's very good, for instance, in keeping people together and making sure that we all work together.
What about fiscal discipline? Because again, this is a question that's come up right through the morning and even now on the show. What about fiscal discipline? And I will also then request Mr. Garg to weigh in once, Narendra Taneja. And I'm asking you this question in your capacity as someone who has been aligned with the BJP for quite some time.
Well, you see, the point is whether it comes to fiscal discipline or it comes to reforms in the agriculture sector, which the Prime Minister was very keen about, or for that matter, privatization, disinvestment, and so on and so forth. There are going to be tough negotiations because there are people who are going to be now part of NDA. They might have their own idea, or in order to just to exercise their weight, because they may not be as heavy as BJP in the coalition, but they might try to. That's all politics. So I don't.
But Narendra Taneja, will this politics not also mean a package, a special package for Bihar, which has been asked for many years, didn't happen? And not just Bihar, but some southern states also. This snowballed into a central versus states fiscal federalism question. So a special package for Bihar that should be factored in as far as fiscal is concerned?
Well, Siddharth, politics is the game of possible. The top priority will have to be, of course, that you run a stable coalition government. That will be the top priority. And at the same time, you are not compromising with the kind of image that India has got about you, that is pro-reform, strong economy, robust, and all that. At the same time, that's India's global image. So you can't compromise at the same time with that.
Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake, Narendra Taneja, to, as some experts say, that the middle class voice, while there is a very large Labharti constituency, and we'll see how that voted for the BJP, but was it a mistake to ignore some part of the middle class when it came to demands like a softer GST or some direct tax giveaways? Was a trick miss there?
No, not really. If you look at, for instance, look at NDA today. I mean, of course, we don't have, 272, but at the same time, we're almost there, unlike Congress, which is not even touching 100. So in order to pull a coalition, you need a very robust, strong locomotive. That's BJP. So I think beyond the point, you will find the coalition partners are going to work together with BJP to make sure that, the things go the right direction. As far as the middle class question is concerned, if you look very carefully, I myself belong to the middle class. Most of us on the panel are actually the middle class.
Yes, we can all raise hands to that. I don't think anyone will say that we are not middle class. Saurav, Vinayak and Subhash Garg. Maybe Vinayak's made more money than all of us together, but we are definitely middle class, no doubt about that.
Well, I am middle class. I live in a Sarkari DDA flat. You see, the point I'm trying to make home is that, look at the last 10 years. All that India has achieved in terms of expansion of economy, India's image overseas, and so forth. The list goes on.
No, Narendra, no one's questioning that. No one's questioning that. But the point is, just stay, because I want to involve the others also. But the point equally is that despite all of this, the BJP on its own has not scored 272. Saurav, you wanted to come in, and then I want to bring in Vinayak. Okay, quickly, please complete your point.
Complete my point.
Yes, please, sir, please.
Done and achieved the last 10 years, middle class has been the one of the frontline beneficiaries, and the middle class people, they know it very well. But despite that, middle class problem is that they very often ignore what they have got. They want more. Man mange more. That's the problem with middle class. So, but I'm not complaining or protesting. All I'm saying is, well, if you say that we should have been more sensitive, I think that should be passed on to Nirmala ji. But the point is that, the party as a whole has maintained good connect with the middle class. That's why in Delhi, we are getting all the 7 seats. Otherwise, it would have been difficult.
Okay. Saurav, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes, a quick interjection for my question to Mr. Taneja. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Taneja, that one of the key things, because the BJP on its own has not secured a majority here, I wanted to ask you, do you see a lot of jostling for key portfolios in terms of the economic ministries? Because a lot of that, please understand that, the Modi 1.0 and 2.0, it was a clear, team which Mr. Modi was running, where everybody was kind of aligned with his economic vision. Now with these two parties coming in and obviously will demand their share of gains, do you see that as a kind of a problem going forward over the next at least a couple of weeks?
Well, you can't
before portfolios are allocated.
You can't rule out such negotiations. Of course, I think BJP is not going to compromise on the CCS, but except for that, I think, let's say, Petroleum Ministry or this ministry or some other ministry, they might ask for such ministries, the railways, for instance, and etc. But that's all part of politics. It all depends on two things. The A that, with that, are you going to convey a message that you're going to stay through, full term with the BJP as far as the NDA is concerned? If that's part of the negotiation, that's one. Number two is that, are you just demanding because you want to do something else, you have something else you don't mind, hanky-panky? Then, of course, BJP is going to say no. But I think it all depends on that. But BJP knows very well, know these parties very well. And my own thing is that these parties also don't have actually that option which you think they have. I mean, are you going to let a party that has not got even 100 seats in Lok Sabha to lead you? Do you want to be led by Congress or do you want to be led by BJP? Which is going to be more stable and which is going to serve your political interest better? Obviously, BJP.
Obviously, the BJP. Vinayak, the continuing question on infrastructure, and this was something that we touched upon. Two scenarios, and Vinayak, please be patient with us, and Mr. Garg, you as well, and all the four of you, because we are going to bring up a couple of scenarios on the screen. A scenario of the NDA with 292 to 340 seats and the possible outcome for the infrastructure sector and capital expenditure. This has not been done by us. We've tried to make sense of a report by Bernstein where it says, and you have it there, and I'll request our producers to stay with that, perhaps try and go briefly full screen. NDA with 272, 290, that's not the scenario right now, it's about 290, but it says reduced capex, shorter cycle, some non-critical projects being shelved, perhaps a reference to the bullet train, just for example. Further infra owners to be on private sector because the infrastructure cycle on the government side could become shorter. So this is scenario one. Now I'll request our producers to bring up the other scenario which is currently underway. On the bottom of the screen you can see 292, 293, it's dropped from 296 during the course of this half hour itself. But 290 to 340, let's take off less than 270 seats because this is not a scenario now. This was earlier during early counting. So 290, 340, let's stay with this. What does it say? Government slows down on capex, leaving space for private sector investment. Announcement of new projects can be slow. And then this also goes into consumption. Gradual rural recovery. Consumption being weak in the near term, but with some push in the budget, for example, that could recover. Manufacturing existing schemes will likely continue, but new fund infusion could go down as far as manufacturing is concerned on account of reallocation of funding. Inflation, food inflation outside of the budget honestly, but hopefully within the RBI's comfort range. Fiscal discipline, no major impact on current plans, and 4.5% by FY26 likely there. And for the market, it said, and this part is very clearly off, where Bernstein had said that there will be mild profit booking in near term and high single digit returns for the year. Well, that didn't play out. I gave this extended map to inform this debate. I'll start with Vinayak. Do you agree with this hypothesis at all? And then I'll go across the panel to try and make sense of it. Vinayak, to you, especially on the infrastructure and capex scenario that was outlined.
I don't agree with it. I stick to my initial remarks which I made at the beginning of the program when you asked me. For various reasons, I don't want to take too much time. For the foreseeable medium term, which means 5-7 years, public expenditure on infra works will continue, and I repeat, will continue to be the pump primer of the economy. This has serious ramifications in terms of continuing to see the high rates of GDP growth, creation of employment, and the tax buoyancies that you have seen in GST collections. So any government in any form, shape, power, position cannot afford to take its eyes off the GDP ball. And if the GDP is continuing, if you have to keep going at it between 7 to 8%, there is no question of capex infrastructure spends getting reduced or capex cycles get shortened. Frankly, I do not see a bouquet, too many. I frankly fail to see any non-critical infrastructure projects, everything that is being done today, road, rail, green energy, etc., are all critical for the nation. That is a momentum that has been unleashed and has been well accepted by economists and the society. One could go on and on because you've thrown a lot of data, but a simple summary, I do not agree with the hypothesis of a slowdown in the infrastructure capex cycle. No government can afford it. In fact, they should continue to encourage it. My story is over.
Saurav, you had a question for Vinayak.
No, basically, my question was on this similar line that, you know, where do you think, Mr. Chatterjee, that I don't mean it, and I don't mean only to talk about infrastructure now. I am saying, do you think the government, the new government which takes charge, will take the, you know, the lessons which have been given to it from the electorate in terms of the rural distress and the problems, the farm sector, the bottom of the pyramid? Do you think they will take that into account, and will then, do you anticipate some spending to ensure some of that stress is taken care of?
Well, certainly you have a point there that there may be lessons learned in this election. There could be a redirection of expenditure more to rural areas, whether it is irrigation, restoration of water bodies, modern warehouses, cold chains. There's a whole lot of agri infrastructure waiting to happen. And I tend to agree with you that I wouldn't be surprised if there are some tonal quality changes in the direction of infrastructure investment, but that doesn't take away from the larger picture that it will continue. You know, we have seen allocations in the union budget for the last many years grow from, it has been, the increase in allocation has been between 20 to 30% every year. 7 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores, 10, and I'll be expecting 13 now. Forget the 11 in the interim budget. So one is expecting the same momentum of 20 to 30% increase in allocation. And the thumb rule is whatever the central government allocates in the union budget, infra sector sees double that spend. Between private sector, extra budgetary resources, and states, they do the balance 50%. Yeah. I don't see any slowdown at all. No government can afford to have it slow.
No government can afford that. That's a very good point. Mr. Subhash Garg, the 100 days agenda, has that been derailed, and do you think the strategic group of secretaries, as it was called, will have to now rewrite some bit of that agenda?
So we don't know what exactly the group of secretaries recommended. So it's difficult to even say that whether this will change or not. So until this becomes clear to you. But let me give my comment on two issues. One which earlier connection was lost to what Vinayak just said on the infrastructure front. On the infrastructure front, I guess you are aware that in the second term, there was an enormous expansion of the infrastructure expenditure from the government side. But there was tremendous scale down on the infrastructure which was the public sector doing on its own. I think it's not common knowledge now that the railways last year of about 2.6 lakh crore spent 0 rupees from its own internal resources. Whereas until 3 years or 4 years back, railways used to spend 80% of its expenditure on capex from its own resources. Likewise, NHAI, which used to spend something close to 60-65% of the capex through its own resources, spent 0 rupees from its own resources. So what the story of the second term of Narendra Modi government is, as far as infrastructure spend is concerned, that it substituted railways and the NHAI's infrastructure spend by its budgetary spend. Overall increase is there. I know, I have written about it. There is a piece publicly available. There is an increase, but that increase is not that much as the budget.
Mr. Garg, Vinayak Chatterjee is raising his hand. He wants to perhaps respond, and then to you, Saurav. Vinayak, you wanted to come in?
I want a quick response to Mr. Garg. It is not that the central government substituted the expenditure of the PSUs. 5 years ago, the railway budget was 40,000 crores. Last year, it was close to 2,20,000 crores. If you see the sheer expanse of the capex that was spent, it was not a question of substitution. It was a question of massive expansion. So I agree with his point of massive expansion, but I do not agree with his point about substitution.
Narendra Taneja also wants to come in. Mr. Garg, I think you have 3 questions coming at you, but let Mr. Taneja come in and then Saurav.
No, Saurabh, Siddharth, my point was that, BJP, 2 points here quickly. First, BJP is, the way they work is BJP is going to analyze everything very carefully. Analyze why, for instance, we lost in this constituency, that area, was that the reason or that. It's not that they're going to be, drop anything or adopt anything new just because of analysis by me or you or any other. They're going to analyze everything thoroughly, especially in the context of what happened in Uttar Pradesh, what is happening in Haryana, or very importantly in Maharashtra. So it's going to be analyzed. But one thing is very sure, knowing, I don't think BJP is going to compromise on signature moves like Vande Bharat or building airports or expansion of expressways and deep water ports and so on and so forth. I don't think, because these are signature projects of the BJP, and including, of course, bullet train. Bullet train is not only BJP, BJP is also part of our strategic relationship with Japan, because they're part funding it. You see, so therefore I think that since BJP, coalition, leading a coalition, but a very, very important pillar in the coalition. And at the same time, I think there are going to be discussions on that. Look, when it comes to economic directions of the government, I really don't think any kind of dilution there. And I personally think that, leaders like Chandrababu Naidu would be very happy to be on board. Of course, Nitishji might, ask for this package, that package, but that's not part of the deal, because that's also going to help BJP in Bihar. There's one Hindi-speaking state where, BJP wants to expand its base. If that, if all this helps, they're going to do it. But as said at this time, I personally, my opinion is that, as far as the economy is concerned, economy is doing very well. We are recognized the fastest growing emerging economy in the world. And that has put BJP in a very good position vis-a-vis domestic audience as well as global. I don't really think there's going to be any change in direction.
Okay, Narendra Taneja, since you say there is not going to be any change in direction, and I know Saurav wants to come in, but just 2 quick news updates for the panel and for our viewers. The lead for the NDA, which was at some point 295, 296, has now come in the course of this discussion, in fact, below 290. So we are at 289 as far as leads are concerned, 54 down on that count. 236 now obviously for INDI, because one of the defining features of this result is also the fact that 109 plus for INDI. I don't know how many people had expected that. Another development, which is Rahul Gandhi expected to speak at the AICC headquarters. For a brief while we had that frame on air. We'll see when he comes up, and as we continue our discussion, my producers have requested me, and I'll request my entire panel to allow me another 30 seconds, because I want to bring up 5 or 6 issues in focus that are now being debated, including by people who are watching this show. The issues that a lot of people are focusing on: what happens to the common civil code? Now, this is not a question maybe that our panelists here may want to answer, but I'm just bringing it up. The second, one nation, one election. The third, what will happen to the bullet train? Mr. Garg and Vinayak, do note that. What will happen to the bullet train? No new taxes. Perhaps wishful, but this is a question with reference to what's been happening on GST. What about more liquidity for rural areas? And is there the likelihood of a farmer's loan waiver? Now, this by itself becomes a full show, but I know our panelists would also have other commitments. So I don't know, I'll start with you, Saurav, for a quick 30-second take, because at some point Rahul will start speaking and we'll have to listen to him, because the Congress has done very well today, as we know. Saurav, so is this a broader debate that is now being triggered, including the points that I just read out?
Are you asking?
Yes,
me?
I think some of these points will clearly be, in the minds of people who were expecting some of these reforms. As I said at the very beginning, I think some of these big ticket reforms will obviously, there will be a pause button, because now you have a coalition government. You cannot, sort of ramrod these reforms through. That is point one. But I wanted to ask Siddharth a question, quick questions to Mr. Garg. One, Mr. Garg, is where do you see this asset monetization and disinvestment thing playing out now that you have a coalition? And two, in a few days from now, Reserve Bank of India then sits on the interest rates and the monetary policy committee of the RBI. Do you think that these results will have some kind of a bearing on what RBI does, or is it very clear that RBI will sort of hold on to rates for now as is being widely expected?
Well, RBI's dividend depends upon how it treats the Vimal Jalan committee formula, which was adopted in 2019, and it's now due for revision. I believe that this formula has failed miserably. It has not worked. It has actually put RBI into also a fix, because it has to now generate enough surplus to put into the reserves. If you look at, I don't want to get into the details at this moment, but to answer in short your question, RBI will have to take a view about that formula. About the question of these five questions which Siddharth put out, I think social agenda of the uniform civil code, etc. I think there would be realization within the BJP and NDA itself that this perhaps is not yielding political advantage or dividends either. And it's absolutely complex and impossible in my judgment to have a uniform civil code in the country. So I think this is going to get into the complete back burner. Similarly, the issue on one nation, one election, I think again, if you think that there are advantages to the ruling party led by a very strong leader to see that if you have all elections done simultaneously, people will vote for you on both the elections. Whatever results we have may subscribe to it to some extent, Andhra Pradesh and all. So politically, a strong leader may want to do it, but it's not necessarily always working in your favor. You didn't hold the same elections in Jammu and Kashmir, despite the opportunity to having it. Constitutionally and legally, to my mind, this is an impossible thing to do it. So this will also receive a backseat. That's my, but I think you are short of time, so I'm not responding.
Narendra Taneja and Vinayak, please respond to this, because at any point now, we will have Rahul Gandhi speaking and we'll have to cut to that. But those 5-6 crowdsourced points that I just read out, just respond to that. Narendra Taneja.
Yes, Siddharth. When it comes to uniform civil code, let's not forget one thing. That's the BJP's goal. It may take 5 years, 10 years, or it may take...
But that's not the NDA goal now. It won't be the NDA goal now.
It was never NDA goal. It's the BJP goal. Number one, it's important. If they have to wait for 5 years, they will wait for 5 years. They need to wait for 10 years, they will wait for 10 years. You see, that's how the BJP has got a long-term vision for India. It works on that. But if, for instance, if it does work, let's say, this time within this coalition, so be it. But that does mean that BJP stops working on it.
Okay, the Congress PC is about to start. Vinayak, 30 seconds. Bullet train, yes or no? So Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi also coming in. Vinayak, a quick answer, sir.
Train that runs fast. Why attack it? Over.
Okay, that was a bullet answer in bullet speed, and Vinayak, you are always a sport. Narendra Taneja, Subhash Garg, I don't know if you will want to stay on. Saurav and I will stay on to do a bit of decoding after listening for some time to the Congress press conference. So you are welcome to stay on, but we'll cut in now that we see Rahul Gandhi, Mallikarjun Kharge, Sonia Gandhi in the same frame, and we've gone full frame to allow you viewers to both look at the Congress leaders. There's a lot of press in the room, and obviously a sense of palpable excitement in the Congress, Jairam Ramesh, the media in charge, someone who's been at it for months now. And one of the defining features of this election was the Congress game on social media. Again, a subject that has perhaps not received enough attention, but the mics are being passed around and hopefully they will get switched on and we will see the Congress president speak anytime soon. So let's have his fader up and see what he has to say.
Respected Madam Sonia Gandhi ji, Rahul Gandhi ji, प्रियंका गांधी जी और इस मंच पे बैठे हुए हमारे पार्टी के सभी नेतागण, आज जो देश में चुनाव के रिजल्ट आए हैं, ये मैं तो पहले कहूंगा ये जो रिजल्ट है जनता की रिजल्ट है और ये जनता की जीत है और लोकतंत्र की जीत है। हम पहले से यही कह रहे थे कि ये लड़ाई हमारी मोदी वर्सेस जनता है, लोग हैं। तो 18वीं लोकसभा के चुनाव में हम विनम्रता से जनमत को स्वीकार करते हैं। इस बार जनता ने किसी एक दल को पूर्ण बहुमत नहीं दिया, खासकर सत्ताधारी दल भाजपा ने एक व्यक्ति एक चेहरे के नाम पर वोट मांगा। अब ये स्पष्ट हो गया है कि ये मैंडेट मोदी जी के खिलाफ गया है। ये उनकी राजनीतिक और नैतिक हार है। जो व्यक्ति बार बार अपने नाम से ही हर जगह वोट मांगते थे, उनकी ये बहुत बड़ी हार है और नैतिक दृष्टि से ये तो उनको बहुत बड़ा नुकसान हुआ है। आप जानते हैं कि कांग्रेस पार्टी और हमारे इंडिया गठबंधन से बहुत प्रतिकूल माहौल में चुनाव लड़ा। सरकारी मशीनरी ने कदम कदम पर अवरोध डाला, बैंक खाते सीज करने से लेकर तमाम नेताओं के खिलाफ अभियान चलाया। फिर भी शुरू से आखिर तक कांग्रेस पार्टी का कैंपेन सकारात्मक था, पॉजिटिव था। हमने महंगाई, बेरोजगारी, किसानों और मजदूरों की बदहाली और संविधान संस्थाओं का दुरुपयोग जैसे विषयों को केंद्रीय मुद्दा बनाकर हम जनता के सामने गए थे। इन मुद्दों पर बड़ी संख्या में लोग हमसे जुड़े, हमारा समर्थन किया। प्रधानमंत्री ने जिस तरह का कैंपेन किया वो इतिहास में लंबे समय तक याद रखा जाएगा। कांग्रेस के घोषणा पत्र के बारे में मोदी जी ने जो झूठ फैलाया, जनता ने उसे समझ लिया। मैं इस मौके पर कहना चाहूंगा कि श्री राहुल गांधी जी की दोनों यात्राएं, भारत जोड़ो यात्रा और भारत जोड़ो न्याय यात्रा के दौरान लाखों करोड़ों लोगों को मिलना, लोगों की समस्याओं को सुनना और आगे चलकर उन समस्याओं का हल ढूंढना हमारे कैंपेन का आधार बना। हमने इसी को 5 न्याय और 25 गारंटी का नाम दिया और इसी के आधार पर हमने गारंटी कार्ड बनाया। हमारे कार्यकर्ता उसे लेकर घर घर पहुंचे और लोगों को संपर्क करें। इसके अलावा जो एक महत्वपूर्ण बात है वो भाजपा नेतृत्व की अहंकार की वजह से हुई। उन्होंने धीरे धीरे सारे संवैधानिक संस्थाओं के ऊपर गैर कानूनी तरीके से कब्जा करने की कोशिश की, फिर इनका उपयोग विरोधी दल के खिलाफ करने लगे। जो दब गया उसे दबा के अपने तरफ लिया, जो नहीं दबे उसकी पार्टी को तोड़ दिया, नहीं तो फिर जेल में डाल दिया। लोगों को ये विश्वास हो गया था कि मोदी जी को एक मौका और मिला तो अगला हमला संविधान पर सीधा होगा और लोकतंत्र पर होगा। इसीलिए लोगों को इसके प्रमाण नए संसद सत्र के साथ ही दिखेंगे। खुशी इस बात की है कि भाजपा इस षड्यंत्र में अब सफल नहीं हो पाएगी। मैं इस अवसर पर सीपीपी चेयरपर्सन श्रीमती सोनिया गांधी जी, हमारे लोकप्रिय नेता राहुल गांधी जी, प्रियंका गांधी जी का विशेष मैं धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं। और इन्होंने दिन रात बराबरी से पूरे देश में कैंपेन किया और हमें एक मजबूत स्थिति में पहुंचाने के लिए भारी मदद इन्होंने की। और मैं ये कहूँगा कि इनके वजह से हमको बहुत बड़ा प्रोत्साहन देश में मिला और आज ये स्थिति जो बनी है उनके वजह से बनी। और हमारे करोड़ों कार्यकर्ता जो है देश में, उन्होंने भी हमारा साथ दिया। इसीलिए मैं बहुत बहुत उनको धन्यवाद देता हूं। आखिर मैं इंडिया गठबंधन के अपने सभी साथियों और शुभचिंतकों का धन्यवाद करता हूं। सभी एक साथ मिलकर एक स्वर में रहे, सभी ने मिलकर प्रचार किया और एक दूसरे की मदद की। हमारे हजारों लाखों कार्यकर्ताओं ने अच्छे तालमेल के साथ काम किया। आप सभी का धन्यवाद। अभी हमारी लड़ाई अंजाम तक नहीं पहुंची है। हम सबको आने वाले दिनों में इसी तरह लोगों के अधिकारों के लिए, संविधान की रक्षा के लिए, लोकतंत्र के बचाव के लिए, देश की तरक्की के लिए, सीमाओं पर सुरक्षा के लिए लड़ते रहना चाहेंगे। हमें सुनिश्चित करना होगा कि संसद सुचारू रूप से चले, विपक्ष के मुद्दों को प्राथमिकता मिले, संसद में उन पर बहस हो। आने वाले दिन महत्वपूर्ण होंगे। हम आपसे बात करेंगे जब कभी भी मौका मिले। आप सभी को मेरा धन्यवाद और आपका साथ भी हमको रहा और हमने चुनाव में भी जहाँ हमको जितना हो सकता है वो साथ आपने दिया। इसलिए आप सभी को भी मैं धन्यवाद करता हूं और सभी को नमस्कार।
शुक्रिया खड़गे जी। मैं राहुल जी से गुजारिश करूंगा वो आपको संबोधित करें।
नहीं, खड़गे जी आपने बड़ी सही बात बोली। जहां तक आप हमारी मदद कर सकते थे उसी लेवल तक मदद की। देखिए, ये चुनाव इंडिया गठबंधन और कांग्रेस पार्टी सिर्फ एक राजनीतिक दल के खिलाफ नहीं लड़ी थी। ये चुनाव हम बीजेपी, एक राजनीतिक दल, हिंदुस्तान के इंस्टीट्यूशंस, हिंदुस्तान का जो पूरा गवर्नेंस का स्ट्रक्चर है, इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज, सीबीआई, ईडी, ये सब, आधी जुडिशरी, इन सब के खिलाफ हम लड़े थे। क्योंकि इन सब संस्थाओं को, इन सब इंस्टीट्यूशंस को नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने और अमित शाह जी ने कैप्चर करा, धमकाया, डराया। प्रेस की तो मैं बात करता रहता हूं। आपको मतलब काफी बार कहा है कि आपका भी रोल रहना चाहिए और उस रोल को काफी लोगों ने किया, काफी लोगों ने खुल के किया, काफी लोगों ने छुप के किया। और आपके इमोशंस कहां थे हमें मालूम है। लड़ाई संविधान को बचाने की थी, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को बचाने की थी। और मैं आपको सच बताऊं तो मेरे माइंड में था पहले से, जब इन्होंने हमारा बैंक अकाउंट कैंसिल किया, जब चीफ मिनिस्टर्स को जेल में डाला, पार्टियां तोड़ी, मेरे माइंड में था कि हिंदुस्तान की जनता अपने संविधान के लिए एक साथ खड़ी होकर लड़ जाएगी, और यह सच साबित हुआ। मुझ में भरोसा था और मैं हिंदुस्तान की जनता से, इंडिया गठबंधन के पार्टनर्स से, कांग्रेस पार्टी के हमारे सब नेताओं और बब्बर शेर कार्यकर्ताओं से दिल से धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं। आपने संविधान को बचाने का पहला और सबसे बड़ा कदम ले लिया है। कांग्रेस पार्टी ने इस चुनाव में, कांग्रेस पार्टी के सब नेताओं ने 2-3 चीजें की। सबसे पहले हमने इंडिया गठबंधन के पार्टनर्स की रिस्पेक्ट की, उनकी जो विशेष थी उनको हमने साथ लिया, और आपने देखा होगा कि जहां भी गठबंधन लड़ा हम एक होकर लड़े। दूसरी बात, कांग्रेस पार्टी ने क्लैरिटी से हिंदुस्तान को एक नया विजन दे दिया है, प्रो पुअर विजन, प्रो प्रोडक्शन विजन हिंदुस्तान को इंडिया गठबंधन ने साफ दे दिया है। यह जो हमारा परफॉर्मेंस हुआ है, इंडिया गठबंधन का परफॉर्मेंस हुआ है, इसके पीछे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, जो रिजर्वेशन पर बीजेपी ने आक्रमण किया, गरीबी, अदानी जी के आपने स्टॉक्स तो देखे होंगे, देखे हैं वो स्टॉक्स उनके, तो बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग बात है। जनता अदानी जी को मोदी जी से डायरेक्टली कोरिलेट कर रही है। मोदी जी की हार होती है, स्टॉक मार्केट कहता है भैया मोदी जी गए तो अदानी जी गए, मतलब डायरेक्ट रिलेशनशिप है, करप्शन की रिलेशनशिप है। और देश ने नरेंद्र मोदी जी को साफ कह दिया है कि हम आपको नहीं चाहते हैं। एंड दिस इज द मेन थिंग दैट दिस इलेक्शन हैज सेड। द कंट्री हैज unanimously and clearly stated, we do not want Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah to be involved in the running of this country. We do not like the way they have run this country. We do not appreciate the way they have attacked the constitution. We do not appreciate the way they have run this country for the last 10 years. So that is a huge message to Mr. Narendra Modi. I'd like to thank everybody who has participated in this election. I am extremely proud of the people of India. I'm extremely proud of the people who have resisted this onslaught on the constitution. और अंत में मैं आपको कह दूं कि इसको बचाने का काम हिंदुस्तान के सबसे गरीब लोगों ने किया है, सबसे गरीब लोगों ने किया है, मजदूरों ने किया है, किसानों ने किया है, दलितों ने किया है, आदिवासियों ने किया है, पिछड़ों ने किया है। इन लोगों ने इस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को बचाया है। इस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन देश की आवाज है। बहुत सारे लोग ने इसको नहीं बचाया, चुप रह गए थे, मगर हिंदुस्तान के सबसे गरीब लोग, सबसे कमजोर लोग खड़े हो गए और उन्होंने इस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को बचाया। मैं उनका धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं, उनसे कहना चाहता हूं कि कांग्रेस पार्टी आपके साथ खड़ी है। जो हमने आपको वायदे किए थे, हम वो वायदे आपके लिए पूरे करेंगे। जाति जनगणना, महालक्ष्मी, ये हमारे वायदे हैं। धन्यवाद।
शुक्रिया राहुल जी। अभी 3-4 सवाल सिर्फ हम लेंगे। एक मिनट प्लीज, एक मिनट, शांत हो जाइए प्लीज, शांत हो जाइए प्लीज, शांत हो जाइए, एक मिनट शांत हो जाइए। एक मिनट शांत हो जाइए। एक मिनट, खड़गे जी और राहुल जी आपका 4-5 सवाल लेंगे। संजीव, हाँ जी, एक मिनट, एक एक करके चिल्लाइएगा मत प्लीज, चिल्लाइएगा मत। हाँ संजीव।
Rahul ji, although the NDA has emerged as, they're getting the majority, but some of its partners have been your partners in the past, including the TDP and the JDU. So have you decided to sit in the opposition, or there are chances of government formation by the India government?
As we have said earlier, we're going to have a meeting with our partners, the India Alliance partners. I believe that meeting is tomorrow, and these questions will be raised there, and they will be answered there. We respect our alliance partners, and we are not going to make statements in the press without asking them their opinion.
सर, आप ये कह रहे हैं कि ये हिंदुस्तान के गरीब की जीत है, संविधान बचाने की जीत है, तो अगर आप लोग विपक्ष में बैठते हैं और सरकार बनाने की पहल नहीं करते हैं, क्योंकि नंबर एनडीए और इंडिया अलायंस में कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं है, और अगर पहल नहीं करते हैं तो कैसे उनको आप जो है आगे उनका हक दिलाने के लिए आगे आ पाएंगे?
वही सवाल आप मतलब दूसरे तरीके से पूछ रहे हो। कल डिसाइड होगा, इंडिया गठबंधन की मीटिंग है, कल हमारा अलायंस डिसाइड करेगा। बड़ी फाइन लाइन है, तो जो इंडिया गठबंधन डिसाइड करेगा उस पर हम एक्शन लेंगे।
सर, खड़गे साहब भी आपसे पूछना चाहते थे कि यहाँ पे बीजेपी में जश्न हो रहा है और उनके हिसाब से एनडीए को मेजॉरिटी मार्क्स से ऊपर मिला है, तो एनडीए सरकार बना रही है। तो यहाँ पे क्या आपको लगता है कि आपने कहा नैतिक आधार पे प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी को नहीं बने रहना चाहिए, क्या आपको लगता है कि बीजेपी में भी खेमेबंदी होगी इसको लेके, और क्या खुद नरेंद्र मोदी को ये फैसला लेना चाहिए?
देखिए, अभी राहुल गांधी जी ने आपके सामने स्पष्ट किया, जब तक हम अपने अलायंस पार्टनर से बात नहीं करेंगे और जो नए पार्टनर हमको जुड़ने वाले हैं उनसे भी किस तरीके से हम बात करके अपने को मेजॉरिटी बना सकते हैं वो देखेंगे। सारे स्ट्रैटेजीज अगर यही मैं बोलूँगा फिर मोदी जी होशियार हो जाएंगे, इसलिए
जयराम जी
राहुल जी, खड़गे साहब ने कहा कि हम जनादेश को स्वीकार करते हैं। जनादेश इंडिया गठबंधन के लिए क्या है? विपक्ष में बैठने के लिए या सरकार बनाने की कोशिश करने के लिए? और आप दोनों सीटों से जीते हैं, बधाई। आप कौन सी सीट रखने वाले हैं?
नहीं, सब दोनों सीटों से जीता हूं, और रायबरेली और वायनाड के जो वोटर्स हैं उनका दिल से धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं। अब डिसाइड करना है कौन सी सीट पे मैं रहूंगा, थोड़ा पूछूंगा और फिर डिसाइड करूंगा। दोनों सीटों में तो नहीं रह सकता हूं, बट अभी डिसाइड नहीं किया है।
राहुल जी, भारत जोड़ो यात्रा के लिए जब आप निकले थे तब से लेके अब तक काफी लंबी यात्रा रही, काफी बीच में उतार चढ़ाव आए। अब 100 का आंकड़ा आपने छुआ है। 2009 में जब इसी तरह का मैंडेट आया था तो पार्टी के अंदर दो राय थी, एक हम विपक्ष में रहें, पार्टी मजबूत करें, या सरकार के साथ जाएं। आप सरकार के
2009 में
2009 में हाँ
नहीं, 2009 में तो क्या बात?
नहीं, 2009 में दोबारा जब बहुमत मिला था तब एक राय थी कि आप विपक्ष की पॉलिटिक्स करके पार्टी को मजबूत करें।
ऐसी कोई राय नहीं थी, आपकी रॉन्ग इन्फॉर्मेशन।
अब मैं पूछ रहा हूं, अब आपसे पूछ रहा हूं, दो चीज है। ये जो मैंडेट मिला है, आप अपोजिशन में रह के आप और पार्टी मजबूत करना चाहते हैं या सरकार बनाना चाहते हैं? आप चाहते क्या हैं?
नहीं, देखिए, हम एक कोalition के भाग हैं, ठीक है। कांग्रेस पार्टी है, बाकी पार्टियां हैं, और उनके साथ अभी हमारा डिस्कशन नहीं हुआ है। हमने, भैया शांत हो जाए, हमने उनसे कहा था, इंडिया पार्टनर से कहा था कि चुनाव के बाद 5 तारीख को हमारी मीटिंग होगी और उस मीटिंग में हम ये जो सवाल है इसको डिसाइड करेंगे। तो सचमुच में इस सवाल का जवाब आज हमारे पास है नहीं, कल होगा।
राहुल जी, अमेठी में आपके लिए कहा गया कि राहुल गांधी ने अपने पीए को चुनाव लड़ा दिया, अब उन्हीं किशोरीलाल शर्मा
नहीं, देखिए ये
बीजेपी ने कहा था।
नहीं, देखिए बीजेपी लोगों को रिस्पेक्ट नहीं करती है
और आज उन्हीं किशोरीलाल ने हरा दिया,
तमीज से बात नहीं करती है। मगर किशोरीलाल शर्मा जी जो हैं वो 40 साल से अमेठी में कांग्रेस पार्टी के लिए काम कर रहे हैं और उनका अमेठी की जनता के साथ रिश्ता है। शायद बीजेपी के लोगों को यह बात समझ नहीं आई थी कि किशोरीलाल शर्मा जी अमेठी से बहुत क्लोजली कनेक्टेड व्यक्ति हैं और इसलिए उनकी जीत निश्चित थी। और मैं उनको कंग्रेचुलेट करना चाहता हूं कि अच्छी तरह वो जीते हैं। और उनको बारे में ये कहना कि वो पीए हैं, स्टनो हैं, ये बिल्कुल गलत है, ये ऑफेंसिव है, ये नहीं कहना चाहिए।
राहुल जी मैं मोहित हूँ न्यूज नेशन से। सर कहते हैं
आपने एक बात बोली जो मैं इसके जवाब देना चाहता हूं। देखिए यूपी की जनता से मैं कहना चाहता हूं, आपसे ज्यादा पॉलिटिकल विजडम, मतलब आपने कमाल करके दिखा दिया। यूपी के जनता ने कमाल करके दिखा दिया। नहीं, बहुत सारे स्टेट्स ने कमाल करके दिखाया, मगर बीजेपी यूपी ने हिंदुस्तान की राजनीति समझकर, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पर खतरा समझकर उत्तर प्रदेश ने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की रक्षा की है। और मैं सब स्टेट्स का धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं, मगर उत्तर प्रदेश को मैं स्पेशल कहना चाहता हूं, आपने कांग्रेस पार्टी का, इंडिया गठबंधन का समर्थन किया। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
राहुल जी
आखिरी सवाल। और इसमें यूपी में एक और बात मैं बोल देता हूं, एक और बात यूपी के बारे में बोल देता हूं। इसमें मेरी बहन प्रियंका गांधी का भी काम है, तो यहां पीछे छुपी हुई है।
राहुल जी शुक्रिया, साथियों शुक्रिया, हो गया। सर राहुल जी
Well, that was an extremely short but significant set of remarks by the Congress, a newfound spring in the step of the Congress party, Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, Mallikarjun Kharge, Jairam Ramesh taking a few questions. The key headline from that, repeated questions from all the journalists there: will the Congress and the India Alliance in effect claim power, because the tally of 293 versus 232, and this very sharp point made there that the alliance partners with the NDA right now have been in the past allies of the Congress, and therefore what is the plan? And consistently Rahul Gandhi is saying we will discuss this at a all party meeting of the India Alliance that's been called for tomorrow, the 5th of June. Mallikarjun Kharge there sort of introducing a bit of what I would say in market parlance, throwing a small, shagufa there in some ways. He said, we will discuss this, and I'm paraphrasing this in English. He said, and new partners are going to join us. And that new partners going to join us, and the words that he used, apne ko majority banane wale hain, roughly words to that effect. So the question of will the Congress make a move on power is open, and it's right there in the air. It adds to all that has been floating around through the day today, that the Congress has been reaching out to allies, that Sharad Pawar has been making phone calls, and I imagine this will happen all night, and we will get to know by tomorrow what happens. And later the BJP is also perhaps going to let us know more of what it is going to say. And one more quick headline before I go to the entire brass of business today. who is here with us. Rahul Gandhi went after the Adani stocks once again, the Adani group once again. And those comments there clearly suggesting that as far as the Adani pack is concerned, no let up likely by Rahul Gandhi in his verbal attacks. But Saurabh Majumdar, editor of Business Today, Shailendra Bhatnagar, markets editor of Business Today Television, and Sakshi Batra, senior anchor at Business Today Television, here with us. Saurabh, okay, we'll try and get Saurabh later on, but absolutely. Shall, the big question right now is what will happen to markets when they open on Wednesday? It's been a terrible Tuesday, a black swan events of sorts, and we've seen the kind of wealth destruction that has happened today. Is Wednesday going to be better, or are investors in for more short-term pain?
So Siddharth, I don't see any let up in terms of the, how should I say, the dislocation that the market has suffered. Will the pain be as much as we've seen today? That's unlikely, because you don't see simultaneously 5-7% downticks on a regular basis, but the pain will be prolonged. So it's not a end to horrors, but what will possibly happen over the next 2 or 3 sessions is that you'll see the PSUs being derated further. The Adani group, of course, will continue to suffer some pain. Out of the 10 Adani stocks that we track, about 7 of them ended 20% lower. 2 of them were down between 7 and 9%, and 2 ended about 5-7% lower. So that pain will most probably persist, not in the percentage terms, but in the terms of stocks falling a little more further. But I would imagine that the worst is behind us, and now it will be 1,000 cuts that will keep on coming, because the voting is still not over and the counting is still not over, and I would just reserve my judgment unless I see the final tally that the NDA will have. As you know, between say 3:30 p.m. and now, the tally slipped from 300 plus to about 294, and still we don't have the final number. The Congress party has held an event, the presser that we just cut into, but there is no word from the BJP.
Okay, these are comments, viewers. This is important at 6:15 p.m. IST, and because this video is going to be available separately, where we try and answer this question that will the pain continue? Will there be prolonged pain, or is there a recovery, at least the beginnings of a recovery in offing? Will the markets and specific counters and sectors start clawing back? We are trying to decode that here at BTTV, so that Wednesday morning when you approach the markets, you have some guidance. Sakshi, I'm coming to you. The point that Shail raised, and this is the worst over, or is there going to be more pain? Sakshi Batra.
Well, Siddharth, if there is more pain to be had, we need to see what Rahul Gandhi really comes up with the statement tomorrow after speaking to the coalition partners, and in the interim, what the NDA government really talks about as to whether they are in a strong footing to really form the government this time around. Most of the brokerage houses, I have 2 brokerage houses reports, UBS and MK, that are pointing out right now the situation seems that the NDA will be formed with the dependence on the allies, which means the government, the BJP will not have that kind of a strong position which it had enjoyed in the last 5 years or 10 years for footing as well. So which means they will have to depend on the allies, they will have to share cabinet portfolios, and that would mean policy paralysis, and that could be a big dampener, and the markets are going to be jittery for the long term. Now, in case there is this banner of sorts coming in from Rahul Gandhi that they are in a position to form the government, if something to that tune, which none of the market experts had so far assumed. If that happens, markets could fall further. Shankkar Sharma, Gaurang Shah, both of our 2 guests who joined us for the closing comments, they did say we cannot rule out a 5 to 10% downtick in case uncertainty has to prevail.
Sakshi, stay with us. You're in the newsroom, and the scenario shell that Sakshi just outlined, I will try and read that from the UBS quick report on India market strategy, headlined as a weaker mandate for Modi. What does it mean for the markets? And in answer to the question that they asked themselves, how will the new government look like? They gave 3 scenarios. I take scenario 3 first. Some of the key alliance partners of the BJP switch sides. Shell, and this question is coming to you, and the opposition INDI alliance comes to power, and UBS says this could lead to meaningful changes in trajectory of government policies. Now, we don't know whether scenario 3 will play out. We are not saying that. We are just putting on record stuff that is already floating and being discussed in the markets. So, viewers, don't get upset with us. Don't shoot the messenger. We are just asking these questions. Earlier today, on a very brief appearance on India Today, I said that part of the nervousness in the markets is the fact that the BJP is short of a majority on its own, and will there be a 3.0? And that's a question that's still up in the air. Shell, will this be the biggest factor weighing on markets, or will the markets will say, hey, anybody can come into government as long as they don't do something completely crazy, we'll be okay?
So, Siddharth, I'll qualify my answer by saying that this is in response to a question out of a research report, whether the scenario 3, where the present incumbent goes out of power and a new leadership is in place as far as the market is concerned, then you will see further destruction in prices. Sectors that were favored by the present dispensation will be derated very sharply. In any case, stock prices in the PSU segment, whether it's defense, whether it is railway, whether it is the PSU banks, were flying very high, far above what their true value was, and all these will suffer further destruction. My understanding is that the NDA alliance was formed before this election was taking place. The flock will stick together, and most probably about 90-95% it is the NDA government that is coming back in power, unless this data changes for the worse, because the results are still to be out. The BJP and the NDA are yet to claim victory. So we have to keep these 2 caveats in mind. Should they claim victory and the results are in favor of the BJP-led NDA alliance or the NDA-led BJP alliance?
Well, Shell, you know, developments continue. Yeah. And I repeat once again, viewers, you will see this discussion as a recorded video. So don't sort of lose your bearings. Mamata Banerjee obviously going on the front foot, calling for the Prime Minister's resignation, saying that she's been in touch with various alliance partners, and Mamata herself had kind of in the last few days displayed a certain different mood. But Sakshi and Shell, I'll come to you first, Sakshi. The Nifty has had a big correction. How do you think major market participants are likely to approach this level? Do you see anybody adding to their positions, or will they wait for a further correction if a far more negative worst case scenario like the one that has been outlined by one brokerage house, if that were to play out?
Absolutely. So Siddharth, some of the smart money has also flowed in. If we look at the intraday chart, we will be able to see that the sharpest dip did see some buying action. Now, whether that was short covering or some other money really pouring in is something that we will get to know. But long-term investors have at least started to nibble into this dip for sure. They have bought a lot of people who I have spoken to, even our guests. Gaurang Shah also said that I did buy in my personal capacity in the dip today. So there are several long-term investors who made use of this sharp dip, a 1,000, 1,500 point of a dip that is unusual and rare kind of an event. markets have matured. We have seen that retail investors have seen that the markets have the capacity to bounce back after any major event. The biggest event in the past to refer to is the COVID-19 case that we saw, a sharp downfall, but the way markets recovered did talk about the maturity of the retail investors. So the long-term investors may have used this opportunity to probably put in SIPs and mutual funds. Traders are still going to be staying a little on the edge till the time uncertainty really clarifies.
Shell, this was not an election outcome that market valuations were set up for. India has been expensive, and everyone, including Jim Rogers, pretty much has maintained that. I don't know the trajectory of corporate earnings, perhaps significantly divorced, barring a few sectors, from a political result. But given this reference that Sakshi made to post-COVID adjustments and pragmatism by various investors, including retail investors who then started rushing in significant numbers, is that also likely to play out? Because people will start finding pockets of value in this market.
Siddharth, pockets of value were visible about a week ago when the good monsoon and a very strong GST number, a very strong GDP number came in. Look at how the FMCG stocks have performed today, in particular Hindustan Unilever, Dabur, Hero Motors as well. So the new dispensation, whether it is led by the BJP and the NDA alliance, or let's presume 1% it happens that a Congress-led alliance will come in, then the money will be spent in sort of ameliorating this rural distress, this unemployment, this pain that we are seeing as far as inflation is concerned, and those kind of stocks are gaining ground. My understanding, Siddharth, is that this is a knee-jerk reaction.
But how long? How long will this knee-jerk remain?
This will remain in place for at least 2.5 weeks, unless we know what the cabinet is. See, Siddharth.
So is this a time? Is this a time, Shell, where caution should trump greed? Because everyone's fearful, but if you see large dips, large cuts, greed also comes back into play.
See, Siddharth, my own understanding after 27 years in the market and 30 years as a 30 years in the market, out of which 27 I have been a journalist, is you should not catch a falling knife. It's a very simple answer.
Well, Rahul Arora also said that, former journalist and now the CEO of Fund House, but there is greed. There is greed. People have certain addictions. They know they are not good, but they still indulge in them. And trading on the markets is also addiction. It's also almost become like a mobile phone game, and people buy and sell while walking around through their mobile phone.
So for those who wish to sort of deploy, like you said, they are addicted to the market. The best thing is to buy an ETF, and that too either on the Nifty or the Bank Nifty, possibly Nifty because it's slightly wider. My understanding is that unless we have which coalition will be forming the government, you shouldn't put in serious money. It is okay, we chatter on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on a minute basis, ye dekhiye, wo dekhiye, but real money is not made that way. My understanding is if there is a Congress-led alliance, the scenario 3 you point out, there will be immense wealth destruction.
Shell, I'm sure you, me, and as we wrap up this conversation, have been getting messages, and we've been sort of asked this while walking around. Kal kya kare? And Sakshi, I don't know if you want to answer that, but just some bit of data for us to consider. The last time that we had a major upheaval when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was voted out in 2004, that was also a surprise, India shining moment.
Yes.
At that time, the Nifty was just around, I can see a 12.24% change happened then.
Yeah.
I am looking at other data, but 4 June 24 will go down in history as far as the Nifty is concerned, the biggest one day.
Yes, this is the single largest point loss that we've ever seen.
Absolutely.
So
because the base is far higher.
Yes.
So in percentage terms, it might be so, but given the very sizable base, this is the biggest single day point
then
fall.
people who are in their right frame of mind should take a cue from that. A fall of this magnitude does not end in one day. It slows down, and while it is slowing down, it still falls. And we really don't know what the outcome is. Unless the BJP claims victory, the market will keep on slipping. Two sets of stocks, one highlighted by Mr. Rahul Gandhi and the other, the PSUs, they will continue to get derated, Siddharth. This is the most practical observation that I can make. Unless we know who's making the government, we will not know the sectors that will go up.
It's interesting you mentioned two stocks from a derating perspective,
Yes.
but you also maintain that this is not a market derating in the short term, Shell?
Siddharth, it is not a market, the froth that was there. And Sakshi and I have often discussed this, chota packet, bada dhamaka, high beta PSU names. All those will go out of favor. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo is what people used to do in the morning. आज हटको खरीद लेते हैं, 3 दिन बढ़ा हुआ है, 3 दिन से गिरा हुआ है, स्टील अथॉरिटी, NMDC, यार कुछ भी ले लो यार, कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा, कोई भी डिफेंस काउंटर ले लो, 5% तो बढ़ ही जाएगा. Making money was easy. That ended, ladies and gentlemen, today, and now hard work is back. You need to rework your Excel sheet, not your phone.
Well, Sakshi, okay, quick 10 seconds as I wrap up.
Absolutely. Siddharth Shell is right when he says the time to make easy money in the markets is probably behind us now. It's now the time for a difficult time. Whatever coalition comes in, we are in for some uncertain weeks ahead, and that the markets will not appreciate for sure. And therefore, Ramdev Agarwal also pointed out one thing in his statements today, and he said, I'm hoping for next 12 years or 18 years as the year of a low return for the markets going forward. So we have to temper down our expectations from the market returns.
Our politics being reset, viewers, and a reset in the markets as well. But remember, as Shell Bhatnagar said, hard work will trump everything else, and I'm glad he didn't say Harvard. But I'll leave you with that thought. We'll be back early tomorrow once again on Market Today on Business Today Television as we try and decode day 2 of what's been one of the most negative surprises in the recent past for the Indian markets. And the big question, kiski banegi fir se sarkar, is still up in the air. And those developments will happen after this discussion. So by tomorrow morning, things might be even more clearer. Thank you, viewers. And with that, it's a wrap on our day-long coverage. We'll see you again. Until then, goodbye.